All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. Very excited to have so many of you join us today. I hope you'll learn a lot from this session. We're going to get right into it. We're talking about science communication today from a lot of different perspectives. We have some really amazing speakers here. Many of us here today have PhDs, MDs, advanced degrees. If you're watching this right now, I expect if you're watching this right now, you have an interesting story. You are an interesting person. You are somebody whose story I would like to hear, and you're probably doing really amazing things. You've had different discoveries. You've lived an interesting life, and I think it would be amazing if more people were hearing your story and heard what you have to share. And something I learned later, something they don't tell you when you're doing a PhD or thinking about doing a PhD, at least in my experience, is that not only does becoming a scientist, becoming a professor, like not only does that require you to become a deep subject matter expert, but it also requires you to become a writer, a speaker, an educator, a teacher, and all these ways, a publisher, like all these things that you have to do that I wasn't really told, and you kind of find your way there. And I think communicating about your research really is a service to your community. And that is something that we should all, think about and actually spend time honing. And it can be a career multiplier. It can be a great creative outlet for you. And all of our speakers here today are here to share their story about how they've approached science communication. So today we've got this amazing lineup of speakers. A quick start. I'm going to do a brief introduction for all the speakers now off the top, just so that you know who's here with us. Then I'm going to chat for a few minutes, giving kind of like a little background on science communication. Each speaker is going to speak for up to 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 10, 15 minutes, hopefully at the end, to do Q&A and have an open discussion. And at the end of the discussion today, we're also going to announce the winners. So we did have like a draw today, and we're going to announce the winners at the end of that. So our first speaker person who will be speaking today is Dr. Brendan Conway-Smith. He is a cognitive neuroscientist, award-winning teacher, lecturer, specializing in metacognition and AI. His work spans academic publications, public communication, including TEDx. His TEDx talk has almost 100,000 views now. If you want to check that out, you might be able to help us push that over for him. His YouTube channel has thousands of subscribers, and he makes really cool stuff there. He writes for the Hill Times and The Conversation, and has recent appearance on the Minding the Brain podcast, and a passion for science communication and creating, making science accessible for broad audiences. And I also have I'm grateful to say that Brendan is also the co-founder of Royal World Archive with myself, and really lucky to have been working with him and been friends with him for so long. We also have here Dr. Kate MacDonald. Kate is a scientist, a writer. She's currently working as a research fellow in Stanford University School of Medicine, where she studies cell biology of cancer. She holds a PhD in medical biophysics from the University of Toronto, has published her research in many top scientific journals, including Nature Communications, Molecular Cell. She's the author of multiple children's books, science books for kids, one called Why Trust a Scientist, a book about the deeply collaborative and creative spirit of the scientific community and the importance of trust and communication and discovery. Kate's also an active science communicator with almost a decade of experience writing for educational articles for Let's Talk Science magazine and talks to the general public. You can also find Kate on TikTok. And yeah, you can find Kate on TikTok, Kate MacDonald PhD, where she's building curious, thoughtful community and sharing her life as a writer and scientist. And we also have with us Mariam. I really hope I get your last name right. Khayretdinova. Mariam is the CEO and co-founder of Brainify AI. This is a large brain data company building the world's most comprehensive EEG intelligence platform to accelerate the development of precision diagnostics and novel treatments for neuroscience, including psychiatry, neurodegenerative disorders. Mariam's also a multiple-time TEDx speaker, author of a recently published book called Decoding Despair: How AI is Reshaping Psychiatry. And she's a Harvard alumna, researcher at the University of Cambridge, and she bridges technology, neuroscience, and AI to make these complex disorders truly explainable and personal. And lastly, myself, I will be talking a little bit today. My name is Dr. Derrick Buchanan. I have a PhD in clinical neuroscience. I am a neuroscientist at Stanford. I have founded 4 companies. I was a Stanford TEDx speaker. Last year, my talk will actually finally be coming out very soon, so stay tuned for that. I hope that you'll all check that out. I am a book author. I wrote a book called An Explanation for Life, The Universe, the Brain, the Mind, and Consciousness. I know it's a very ambitious title, but I tried to capture a lot of complex ideas in a very short, easy to understand way. And that's available in over 100 countries. I've spent 5 years teaching neuroscience, neuropsychiatry, and neurotechnology. I have authored almost 30 peer-reviewed academic publications, inventor of neurotechnologies, and built products. And I'm deeply passionate about science communication and making science scalable and accessible. And that means like translating from, the lab to the real world. So we all have experience here writing scientific articles, and I think a lot of us are here because we want to help you better understand ways to move your science out of the lab and have more people see your science outside of just in the lab or academic settings. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Brennan to open up the show for today in just a minute here. I just want to cover a quick, brief background from not myself, but just on science communication in general. Like historically, science communication happened in a few ways. You'd conduct experiments, whatever research you're working on, you'd have some results, conclusions, you want to share that with your peers, and they may learn something new, hopefully. So you go to conferences, you publish things into your field, and you may write an academic article. And 100 years ago, or maybe 2,000 years ago, you might have went to the town square and preached on your soapbox, or tried to communicate your research to people, or you'd have formal debates about these different topics. And still today, a lot of research follows this pattern. You conduct experiments, you go to conferences with your peers, you publish papers for your peers, and it usually stops there. It doesn't usually go a lot farther than that for most researchers. There's more than 10,000 academic papers published every day, and a lot of those exist behind a paywall. And so the general public doesn't always get to access those. And when researchers publish, we sometimes pay almost $10,000 just to make our papers open access so the public can see them. Meanwhile, you can publish a blog for free, or you can make a blog for free. You can make social media posts for free. There's a lot of things that we can do for free to help get our science out to the world that doesn't have a giant price tag on that. And often, researchers, maybe they'll publish a paper, they'll tweet a link to their paper, they'll make a LinkedIn post with a link, and then it might just end there. And so we want to help you think about different ways of exciting ways to communicate your research, whether that's through TV, through podcasts, through blogging, through Substacks, doing a vlog, meeting with podcasters, creating social media content, etc. There's so many ways that we can do this. And that's kind of what brought us here today. So we want to share all these things with you. Really grateful for all the speakers to be here. And I'm going to pass it to Brendan now and check the waiting room again real quick just to make sure that everybody is in.
Okay, well, thank you, Derrick, for the very kind introduction. I'll just quickly want to ground our appreciation of the history of science communication in sort of how it started. It used to be a very cloistered activity. It used to be a sequestered. Scientists were sort of in their home or their hovel or their university doing their work privately. It was considered very specialized work that the audience, the larger public, couldn't understand. And so what a lot of researchers started doing, including Michael Faraday in the late 1800s, is giving public lectures. He thought that public lectures were part of the scientific duty, or the moral duty even, of scientists. And this moved to the Royal Institution lectures to try to educate the larger public, and that the idea that scientific information should be free, it should be a gift to all of humanity rather than just a few academics. And so Carl Sagan was one of those modern individuals who helped to redefine science communication for the modern age. He would do things no other scientist ever did. He would go on Johnny Carson, a talk show, and he got a lot of flack for it. He got a lot of pushback for scientists saying that it was, they thought it was largely disreputable for him to be going on talk shows and making a bit of a spectacle of himself. But Carl Sagan believed that it was essential to reach the larger public. And maybe I'll just breeze through the next slide there, if you please. But this was considered the Sagan shift, the legitimizing of scientists as public intellectuals, people the public trust. And what it means to be a scientist is to communicate effectively, not only through publications, but through online and through public talks. And so there's this big hunger for science communication. And I think there's never been a more important time, but I want to be mindful of time. And essentially it's the idea that there is a signal to noise ratio. So not to be too much noise to the signal. It gives me pleasure to pass the podium to Kate MacDonald. Thank you very much. Take it away.
Well, thank you. I love that little primer about like what science communication is and how it started and how it's evolved. And I think that most people think about science communication. I completely agree with the sentiment that it's sort of your moral duty, your scientific duty to bring your work as much into the public sphere as possible, given that like this is done on behalf of all people, right? Like this is really privileged work that we do as scientists, but it's on behalf of everybody so that we can all be expanding our knowledge. The tack that I've taken with my science communication is less about talking about my actual work. Like I infrequently speak about the cell biology that I'm doing. What I have tried to do is bring that sense of like just kind of wonder and awe and amazement over the scientific process into the public view. So that has manifested in my children's books, where they're science books, they're educational books, but what I'm trying to center is the way the character feels as she is making a scientific discovery and how human it is and how creative it is and how embedded in community it is. That's also manifested in my class. I teach a class at Stanford about storytelling and science for first and second year graduate students, which again is about centering not the facts, but the process, like the fact that this is a very humanistic, collaborative, communicative endeavor, and making sure that that's really front and center in the public view. And so that's been the goal in the center of my scientific communication work, is to show up on TikTok in front of students in my children's books as this very excited, eager, humanistic, collaborative, communicative person, so that people see that science is done in that way. It's done in that kind of community collaborative endeavor. All right, that's my primer, and then I can hand off to our next person.
Well, you're welcome to share. Thanks, Kate, too. I mean,
Yeah.
we can go deeper too if you've got time, and if you're able
Yeah.
to tell us a bit about your experience, and then we'll kind of like go one by one, and then we can have Mariam come in afterwards if that's all right.
Perfect.
But
So
yeah, you
yeah,
could tell us a bit about your experience, like what that was like writing the books, how you like what that process looked like for you, something like this.
cool. Yeah. So the books, so they're traditionally published books. They're with a publisher that there's two, my nonfiction books and my fiction books have two different publishers. But essentially, a couple times a year, these little indie publishers will have open calls where just any human being in the world that has a book idea can pitch them. And so several years ago in graduate school, I pitched a children's book that was showing the intersection between an artist and a scientist. So the day-to-day work, it being very similar, like you're working with your hands, you're like observing the world and then trying to display it, to represent it back to people. So I pitched that as a children's book, and they got back to me and were like, we don't want that, but would you be a good fit for this other nonfiction book that they had basically seen in my proposal that I clearly wanted to talk about the community of scientists, about the collaborative nature of scientists. And so they said, would you want to write a nonfiction book about that instead? Because the publisher has this very like activist educational bend. And so Why Trust a Scientist is the name of that nonfiction book, about why the scientific endeavor and the scientific method works, like to give us facts that we're pretty sure are true. So that was my first book, was that nonfiction piece for kids about how the scientific method works and why it's trustworthy. And then from that, I just started to notice there was more that I wanted to say to these kids. Like when I would do events or when I would be in front of this age group, the conversations we were having were less about the nitty-gritty details of the scientific method and more about that process, about how it feels to be a scientist and how exciting it is and how embedded in the natural world you are. And that then gave rise to my fiction books, which are about a boarding school for kid scientists, and they solve mysteries on campus using real-life scientific tools. So it's a little bit of that educational bend about how science works, but mostly it is focused on that collaborative and communicative work. And that, again, was just a cold pitch. My first publisher only does nonfiction, so then I was back on the market. And again, indie publishers just have open calls several times a year, pitched the proposal, and got that picked up. I will say that this whole process took many, many, many years. Like I have been pitching books basically constantly since I was in high school. And I got the first book to get picked up like that was a couple years ago in grad school, was the nonfiction piece. And I think that just emerged from, this was something that I was thinking about and talking about and writing about a ton, was this whole process endeavor of the scientific method. And then that manifested again in my class. Like that was another thing that I was hired to teach an entirely different class at Stanford. And I just talked about this philosophy community element so much that my bosses were like, do you want to make a new class? And do you want to just do that for the graduate students? And I was like, yes, obviously. I want to talk about this all the time. So that was really the experience and the process of it, was that I just had this thesis. I had this thing that I was preaching about all the time. And eventually book publishers and Stanford were like, do you want to do that on our platform? So that was really the process of it.
That's very so. Like, if anyone else was, thinking about, so one thing I'll talk a little bit about later is that I self-published my book. You published with like a more traditional publisher, but also like
Yeah.
more on the indie side, and in the children's book space. Like, if you any immediate advice for anybody who might be thinking about how to approach these types of publishers or how to start thinking about writing a book, and you, for example, I believe got paired like with an illustrator. So maybe you're thinking, oh, I'm going to
Yes.
do a children's book, but I don't know how to draw and illustrate, and like that, how the
Yeah.
process looked for you.
This is actually a very common misconception that I found. If you go with a traditional publisher, they explicitly do not want you to bring your own illustrator or your own illustrations. They have their own portfolio of illustrators. So when I went in, I can't draw, so I didn't even try to do that. But I gave them the prose, I gave them the text, and then they went to their portfolio and they solicited pitches from their portfolio of illustrators, and they chose the one that they thought was the best fit for my work. Um, I was not consulted on this process at all. I love my illustrators. It happened to be a perfect fit. But when you work with traditional publishers, you're just one piece of that kind of cognitive machine that produces a book. And that has, those are my books. Yeah. Why Just a Scientist and Izzy Steve is the boarding school about kid scientists. That when you work for a traditional publisher, you do the text, you do the prose, and then you promote the book when it comes out. I'm always chatting about it whenever I have a chance. But other than that, the book is produced by other people. The illustrations are done by someone else, the layout is done by someone else, the publishing of it, the actual like book printing and distribution process is done by someone else, which I actually found to be one of the most rewarding parts about doing the books, especially I'll say the nonfiction one, because it's heavily illustrated. Like if you open that page, it's full of like, it's nonfiction, it's about the scientific methods. They got to grab the kids somehow. It's full of super colorful illustrations and photos and tons of stuff that I never could have come up with. And it really brought the book to life. So having those collaborators with a traditional publisher was just lovely. But yeah, you go in, people think it's just my name on the cover, so you think it's like all you, it's just the author. But no, if you traditionally publish, you're just one piece of that team that designs the book and brings it to life, which was incredibly rewarding. And then just small piece of advice, because you asked for people that are thinking about doing it. For kids' books, especially, my biggest piece of advice is to take that reader extremely seriously. I think a lot of people try to write children's books because they think somehow it will be easier than to write for adults. But these kids are really discerning. Like they know when people are talking down to them, when people are trying to simplify for them, they can sense it. They're very, very smart. And so taking your reader extremely seriously, even when they're an 8-year-old child, is, I think, like you have to start from that position and just having something you really want to say to them and figuring it out at their level. But yeah, making sure that you take those readers really seriously, I think would apply to any age group, but that's something that I find people who write for children often think they can skip.
And you've also done a great job translating a lot of your science into videos, doing explainer videos, cool videos, whether that's like across YouTube, podcasts, and TikTok. And you want to talk for a minute or so on just like what your experience is like doing that? Any recommendations
Yeah,
for people trying to do that, or like what you've learned about your audience?
totally. I love in the bottom right of the slide, you pulled like the very first video project I ever did. I'm like truly 17 years old in that video, which I love. So yeah, let's see, pulling to video. So that's something that I do currently on TikTok. I'm best known for a series I do on TikTok called Here's What I'm Reading Today, where I explain the main findings of the paper on the top of my TBR pile. So it's truly a paper that I'm reading like for my job, and I explain the main findings and why I'm interested in it. And I do like there's overlays where I can do some illustrations to help the reader understand. I actually think that thing I just said about taking your reader super seriously or taking your audience super seriously is a thing that I would recommend as well for video making. My audience on TikTok is primarily young women. It's primarily American women between the ages of 18 to 35. And they, from what I can tell, based on the comments, they don't tend to have science backgrounds. but they are intensely interested. Like they're not scientists, but they like are so curious about how cells work. Like I'm a fundamental cell biologist. I am talking about RNA polymerase. I'm making 8-minute long TikTok videos that have an average watch time of 2 minutes. So people are like locked into these TikTok videos about RNA polymerase with no or very little science background. And if I was to like ask people how to start a TikTok series, that's not the advice I would receive, right? Is to make 8-minute long videos about a molecular phenomena for people with no science background. But that's what people love. People love to know. They love to know about stuff. They're curious about the natural world. They want to understand how their bodies work. They want to understand all these things that we're doing every day, just as a byproduct of our work, is like really intensely looking at the natural world and coming up with ways to explain it. That's a conversation everybody wants to have. And so that again has been really the center of that work, is to take my audience very seriously, to believe that they want to know as much as I want to know, and to kind of share them with the same energy that I have, the same excitement about my work that I feel, to share that with them and not try to bring it down to their level.
That's amazing. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. I will pass it over to Mariam, and as she can tell us a lot about her experience as a speaker and how she maybe tell us about how you approach these TED Talks and all these engagements that you've had there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm really happy that we're talking about today communication, because I think it's very undervalued skill. But once somebody told me, if you are not able to explain your concept, your research, whatever you do to your grandmother, or a 5-year-old kid, you probably have no idea what you do. And honestly, it struck me a lot, because I really noticed that the people who actually understand their job very well, they can explain it using very simple words, very simple metaphors and stories. And this is a skill that you can master, and you should master, because this is, again, our job is to educate people around us and help them to understand the world we live in, or the job that we're working on, or research that we are working on. But you also need to identify your audience and the goals of this communication. So speaking about a TEDx talk, the TEDx, it's more about virality, it's about visibility. It's literally some kind of a small lecture that should spark an idea, give an inspiration, and like leave people with some clear insights. And so you really, like, knowing what is your goals and what is your audience, you have to like think about, okay, so what I really need my audience to live with, what they should have in mind. Because honestly, people are very bad in keeping attention for 10 plus minutes. It is complicated, and especially in the world of the social media. So you really would like them to have some insights and major ideas. So regarding the TED Talks, I decided to go a little bit different way than the speakers that was with me at the same session, and make it as easy as possible, and start doing the storytelling. So the storytelling is something where you actually base the ideas on the like real life experience. When you are providing a figure or somebody they can relate to, like, I don't know, it could be talk about yourself personally, about your friends, or about even some virtual person who you really describe well, and telling like, okay, this is their story. This is like Mary, she goes to that school. That's how she lives. That's what happens to her. And now that's a problem she has. And so from that problem, we can actually learn that and that and that and that. So the communication is very much about how you're going to translate these complex ideas into something simple. On the way technical probably side on how to approach and how to get TEDx talks, should we talk about it as well here, Derrick, today?
Yeah, I would love to hear your take on that too, because that's something I wanted to talk about. Like how, like if you want to do a TED Talk, how do you get one? And if you didn't, like for the audience, if you didn't know, like there is a TED Talk near you for sure. Where like they're in everywhere. Any city, pick a city, to Google TED Talks near me, and you'll find something. And it's a great way to kind of break into being a speaker, like all the major cities, and you apply. And yeah, I'd love to hear your process of how you ended up getting engaged with the TED Talks, Mariam.
So with the first TED Talk, it was very random. It's like literally Harvard nominated me to speak at the TEDx Boston, Harvard Innovation Lab to be precise. With the second TED Talk, I applied myself. So you literally can find a TEDx talk in a city, like as Derrick mentioned, and you can apply. But when you're applying, you need to be really sure that you have your message straight already. So you really know what you want to talk about. You really would like to have a great outline, how you're going to like build this story. And you really need to have a clue why people would like to hear that. So why we should even listen to this conversation. Why is it so important? Because when you're going to apply, first of all, you may like submit a form on the like specific TEDx page. Sometimes you there is no like TEDx page related to some specific stage. You need to find these people on LinkedIn and reach out to them and say several things that will matter for them the most, like why I should be on a stage, why I'm so unique and different that's I would like to speak and people going to listen to me. Second, what is my message and what I would like people to learn about. And the third, this is a way how I'm going to translate it and communicate that. And this is I want people to live with. So you need to have this kind of very straight. But other than that, it's pretty easy. You just literally go into the TED website, you're looking for the upcoming events, you're reaching out either where there's personal websites or through the LinkedIn and submitting all this information. The only advice I can actually give that can increase your chances to end up on a TEDx stage is have somebody who nominates you. Somebody who nominates you, meaning that this person should have like more visibility than you, probably have very like trustable name that they can tell like, okay, this person is great, please consider them, and they're gonna apply for you basically.
Yeah, well, while we're on the topic of TED, and then I want to ask you about your book as well and your experience with writing that. But while we're talking about TED, I'll just jump in for a second. So, first of all, I want to make sure if for the audience's sake, if you're not clear on the difference, so there's TED and there's TEDx, and in the TED sphere, we'll think about TED as what we call like the main stage TED. It's often in it held in BC, British Columbia, in Canada. They've done it there. I don't know if they always do it there, but I think it's pretty regularly there. And then TEDx is like a satellite event that is part of the TED brand, but it's separate, and you can find a TEDx essentially anywhere. So for example, Mariam did TEDx Boston, and I think TEDx, was it Berlin maybe? Or
Berlin, yeah.
Yeah, and like I did TEDx Stanford, there's TEDx Toronto, TEDx what, etc. So like pick a city, and there are so many, and there anyone can kind of set up, or it's usually done through universities or cities that set up these TEDx events. But there is kind of a whole process of applying. In my case, we had auditions. We had to send in a written application. We had to send in a video audition. Then there was kind of like an interview roundtable, and they go from, hundreds of people down to the final, say, 10 people that they actually want to have speak. So if you're thinking about becoming a speaker, though, that was one of the things that was like, I knew that I was passionate about trying to enhance my speaking skills or get more access to speaking stages, and that doing a TED Talk was suggested to me as a way to do that. And one of the ways I started to learn about that was I started reaching out to people who I'd seen had done TED Talks and people that I could get a hold of. And luckily at Stanford, there's a lot of folks who've done TED Talks, so I was able to get in a few calls and meetings with people, and they were able to tell me about their experience. And that's what I'm trying to do today for other people who want to do the same. And then the whole process of actually doing TED is, for us, we had weekly meetings. Once we started, it was like, okay, write your TED Talk, think about your story. What are you actually trying to talk about? You're doing that. We would meet every week with like speaking coaches, with
Wow.
the team. They had us like very structured, doing like courses. They're not always going to function that way, but ours was very cool that we had all that support. And it was about a 6-month process before we actually did the talk. The talks were in April. The auditions were back in like November, December the year before, and then practicing for months. And then we finally would nail down your final talk. And then we had like a dress rehearsal, and then the full big day, like on the big stage. And TEDx has 44 million subscribers on YouTube. So like it's a huge audience that you could potentially reach. And I think that's, it's attractive for a lot of people. Mind you, a lot of TED Talks still, they end up sitting in the hundreds, or maybe you get some thousands of views. And like, you really do have to think about how you like build a campaign around that to actually get a lot of people to see your TED Talk. But it's still like, that's the first step is doing that. Feel free to add anything to that, Mariam, and then I'd love to.
Oh, definitely. You were very lucky. The way how they prepared you. I'll be honest, like both of the TEDx I spoke had nothing close to that. So you basically just have your topic and you have to like submit your speech and show that you are ready somehow. So in my case, I was literally taking acting classes. So I went to acting school because it's usually super cheap. And the second, they're giving you all the necessary skill sets. So you don't need to go to like specific speaker classes, go to the acting school. They will help you to tell you how to relax, how to behave on stage, how to breathe correctly, how to be ready, how to articulate better. So I really recommend you this option if you're like considering being a speaker on the stage. But unfortunately, not all TEDx gonna like give you that full support. So yeah, Derrick, you were very lucky.
Thanks. Yeah, it is something to take seriously, though. I mean, it's amazing to hear that, yeah, you took that initiative to go and take those classes and practice a lot. And I think there is advice on that. And I think, if you end up being someone who's doing a TED Talk where you don't have that level of support, try to find it in others and talk to other TED speakers. I think most people on this call are from the Stanford community, so you might follow that Stanford playbook. And there is the next round of speakers was just announced yesterday, actually. So the talks are coming up in April. I believe there'll be the full show for the 2026 TEDx is in April. So do feel free to go and watch. And like, that's a great way to get started. And maybe you give us a couple minutes on your experience as an author, and then we'll have Brendan jump back in and I'll talk a few minutes and we can open up the discussion.
Well, regarding the book, I never wanted to write a book. I'll be honest with you. I've been approached because of the TEDx talk. So the publisher Wiley, they saw my TEDx talk, came to me and said like, "Hey, do you want to write a book?" And I can tell you that it is a hell of experience. Not really in a good way. It's quite complicated. My book is nonfiction. It was written for innovators, like researchers and investors, somebody who would like to change the mental health space and bring their technology or their ideas to the world that they're going to survive and like exist in this healthcare system. And again, with book is all the same. You first of all really need to decide who's your audience, because it will determine the whole flow of the book and the content of the book, how deep you're going to go. Second, you still would like to relate to your reader. So I really suggest you to add some storytelling, real cases, real patient stories, anything that the people can feel and stay with you attached emotionally. Because I've sometimes read the books written by amazing PhDs, but it's impossible to read. And I know if they lose me, they probably lose in the general audience very fast. And the people would like to feel, and they're like very emotional creatures and they would like to connect. So give them something to connect to. And also, I really like when the books, especially now, because people are very often in their phones and they cannot stay reading, you need to first learn how to repeat the main ideas all the time and to summarize every time, like, okay, that's what we learned and that's what I would like you to keep in your mind before moving next. So this is how the book, I think, can be written to stay in people's minds. But regarding the personal experience, the procrastination part is the crucial for book writing, okay? So if you started writing your book and you feel they're like you're sitting in front of the white paper for, I don't know, for months, it's normal. Because literally everything happens during the mind-wandering process when you let your brain go and just you let yourself to absorb all the information that you would like to put on the book. You let your brain organize it, you let your brain structure, and it's fine to procrastinate. It's a part of work and it may take a significant amount of time. So my book been written in a year. Overall, 9 months of it was literally just mind wandering and reflection, nothing but that. So these are two crucial steps that people blame themselves very often. So please never do this. This is one of the things I would not share. And is you will let yourself to mind wander, let your brain write it inside, then it will be much easier for you just to put it in the paper, because you will just create some notes, you will just have some structure, and out of these notes and structures, then go in this like discipline part where you just have to wake up every morning, set a specific schedule, sit down and just write. But you can do this only if you created the whole content in your brain.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Mariam. Yeah, it's great to hear your book experience and kind of how that your process for that as well. I think people have different approaches for sure, and kind of how you end up there, and like knowing that sometimes like allowing yourself that time and space, but also introducing the structure at the right time. I sort of had a cheat code when I wrote my book, which was I wrote my book during the pandemic. So I had a lot of time at home and a lot of time not seeing people. And I also wrote my book in about a year. And I wrote most of it in about 6 months, and then I rewrote almost all of it in the next 6 months. And it was like very much just getting it started and creating the structure. And one of the things I like to tell people about book writing, paper writing, whatever it is that you're writing, is like just to get words on paper. Like make it that simple. Put words on paper. Just start putting something down, and it really doesn't have to be in full prose or with a full narrative yet. It's just like getting ideas down and then like let them structure and let them take shape. So I want to give Brendan a few more minutes here too, and then we'll try to have the last 10 minutes for conversation discussion. Brendan, would love to hear about your experience, how you approach science communication, your YouTube channel, and like sort of what you like for people who are maybe think they would like to start a YouTube channel. If you've had anything different experience about your TEDx, I know Brendan's TEDx was actually also during the pandemic, so that was definitely a different experience, but it did not hinder its success. It still turned out to be a very successful TED Talk. So yeah, I'll leave it to you for a few minutes, Brendan, and go from there.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks to our speakers. That was really fascinating and great work I really need to look into. If anybody else would like to add their contact information, they can put it into the chat if they want to sort of connect with each other. But yeah, I have to say that it's the modern world is kind of a mixed blessing. It is a double-edged sword. There's such high competition right now. It's just so much noise and so much distraction out there that it gives us an opportunity, I'd say, to distill our message, to craft our message, to make it clear, coherent, compelling, consistent, and it's crucial to being heard these days. And so I took the opportunity whenever I was traveling to conferences to take a little video camera with me and to put it on the back seat. Nobody else would be seen, but I would be videotaping all my talks, and I'd have a Bluetooth microphone. Very important to have good audio. Just a little tip there. Not great video is okay. You need to have good audio. That can be crucial because your message is largely put out by how clear your voice is, how clear your narrative and your messaging is. And so I would simply I started my YouTube channel simply by putting my conference videos up, and I thought nobody would want to hear these. But I got a little bit better at them, a little bit better over time. As podcasts, I started to put some YouTube videos up. I would talk about the articles I would write, the new publications, and slowly traction builds. And I actually ended up having quite some fruitful collaboration on publications and really connected to other researchers in my field through people finding me on YouTube and people finding me on Substack and my articles on metacognition and artificial intelligence through all these different channels. And it's a very quick way of getting people to be aware of your work because the modern world sort of lives and dies by clips. Whether you're being quoted accurately or being misquoted, it's important for you to actually have some quote that people can hear and listen to within 30 seconds because search engine optimization is all about getting your signal through the noise and being able to rise above the din, so to speak. And so I'd say that the first step is having your elevator pitch, your cocktail party, 30-second messaging of what you do. As was said earlier, just something you can explain to your grandmother, and then you can sort of build from there once you have people's interest. But people connect with you through publications, absolutely, but people will also connect with you by seeing your face, hearing your voice, reading your articles, and YouTube and Google will aggregate all the different venues and avenues that you're on, and then get your name sort of available to the public in your field as a sort of an aggregate of all the different platforms that you're on. So I think it's crucial to be just start small, just a quick little video, just 5 minutes talking about your work is a very approachable way to start. But the important thing is to just start. Just get your YouTube channel or Substack or TikTok or what have you up, and then build from there. And you'll find people in your field, in your tribe are very eager to get easy bite-size snippets of your work. So Derrick, I think I might get you to just change to the next slide, please. And yeah, the signal to noise ratio. Yeah, I think I talked about that. It's that's the modern world, really. Two back, I think. It's just such a crazy world out there. So your impact is not just on one well-crafted publication, but also getting your publication heard through transmission by helping people get bite-sized perspectives on it, cutting through all the entertainment. So your impact largely depends on, again, getting these social media ready type vehicles for cutting through all the noise. And I'll just get you to go to the next slide there, please. And there are many different ways you can communicate. As I said, the short explainer videos of your work, 5-minute video of you just talking into your camera on your phone. It's a great way to start. Substack is free. You can write op-eds. You can appear on podcasts. A great way to craft your message. You can start building your platform by just creating a weekly blog or a weekly YouTube vlog as a way of sort of honing and crafting whatever your core idea is and building out from there. So I think I'll stop at the 10-minute mark, and I'd love to sort of open up the floor for conversation and questions to our speakers there.
Yeah, great time. And I'm just going to jump in for a second, and then yeah, I'd love to have some conversation on that. So thanks a lot, Brendan. I will bounce back to me just for 1 second. So first of all, thank you, everybody. Again, I think we still have 10 minutes left to cover some important stuff. I want to just summarize what I think are a few like key takeaways, some like immediate tips, tools, things that you can start to do. You might have noticed in the slides, one thing that we all have in common, if you look at myself, Mariam, Kate, Brendan, we all have our own website. We all have our own name as our own website. It's a good place to start, honestly. If you want to get started with this, if you want to take it at all seriously, go buy your domain name right now. You can buy it for like a couple dollars. Like, it's not expensive usually to buy a domain, anywhere from say like $2 to $10 typically to buy your .com or some version of your name. Like you see Kate had, PhD on hers. So maybe if yours is taken, you can add something like PhD or add your middle name or something like this. This gives you a platform. You can check out our websites. You can get an idea of what these types of websites look like. And you can there's a lot of like ways to get help building those. And it costs maybe, depending on where you go, like I pay maybe a couple $100s a year to like host my website and have it all be accessible. And it's honestly a great investment. And then you can post your videos and all kinds of things there. So that, honestly, first amazing thing to do to start. Once you've bought your website, you can also go, start a social media handle using that name, or, Dr. Buchanan on Instagram, or like Kate with TikTok, and Brendan's talks a lot about metacognition. So he's got his YouTube channel, MetaThink, right? Like, so when you can start doing that, this is a big help. Now, yeah, and Mariam just dropped, I think there's AI tools to help you build websites. And I have a friend that just launched a new website a couple days ago. They built the whole thing with AI, and it's beautiful. So leverage AI. That's a great place to start. And honestly, yeah, just thinking like, how can you take your papers and get them to the next level? And one of the things that Brendan and I did was to try to, it started out as a hobby. We love science communication. We love making videos. And we started this company, Royal World Archive, as an effort to help people do science communication. So we make these short videos using AI with a human in the loop to make videos for academics. And maybe not all academics want to learn how to become video editors, and that's fair. So we started making videos for colleagues of ours. It started in our lab, and then that kind of grew over time. And I'm just going to share like a really quick clip here. And if you have questions, guys, start dropping them in the chat, or do feel free in a minute. You can come off your mute and jump in a second. But I realized I stopped my screen here. Let me come back in. So, I think it's not going to play through the download. One sec. I was just going to show you this, like a demo video of some of what we have. And this is what one of the giveaways that we had is we're giving away 2 free videos. And we also said that we were going to give away like a 50% discount to 20 people who submitted paper. So when you signed up or registered for the event, you had an option to submit a paper that you would maybe want a video made out of one day. So we decided though actually that everybody who joined the call, anybody who submitted a paper, we're going to give everybody. But basically, just to show you kind of an example, you can also go to the website, Royal World Archive, and this demo video is on there. It'll show you, like, essentially what we built is a drag and drop. You drop your PDF onto our website, and it's going to turn it into a video. That's all you have to do. All you have to do is just take it, drop it in there. You get a video in less than 48 hours, and it's going to come to your inbox. And if you are a academic, like, we'll send you a copy of that video, and it's formatted for all, different, long form for meaning like vertical form, horizontal form for YouTube. This is kind of like showing you a little the background of our workflow, how our AI works, and then a bit of what like the human in the loop does there to make that happen for you. So it's just another way of creating that good, cool social media content. Thanks everybody also for dropping their socials in the chat. Do feel free to connect. You'll see also, I dropped all our links, so like all my link to Royal World Archive, but also to myself or Derrick Buchanan in there if you want to connect with us. And really exciting too. So we are launching after today. This was the first, big event that we were hosting on this topic of science communication. We aim to do this more regularly as a series. We kind of covered a lot of stuff, and we want to go more deeper on some of these individual things. So going deep on book writing, have another session focus explicitly more on the verbal, like how going deep on speaking. And like we talked a lot about speaking, but we have a lot to say about actually speaking tips and how to speak well and communicate and things like this. Doing TV segments, doing interviews, going to do podcasts, etc. So we're going to have like a different series that's going to focus on each of those. And as of today, we are launching also this WhatsApp community, which you can join via all my links or the link I put in the chat, or you can if you click the QR code earlier, that'll take you to all our links. And this WhatsApp community there's a bunch of subgroups. One is for people who want to do TV segments and get connected with people for TV, learning about podcasts, learning about book publishing. There's like a whole bunch of subgroups in there that you can start to join, and you get first access to that, and that's also gives you direct access to us. Question?
I had a question for Kate specifically. Kate, you said I was curious, did you start with an audience or did you start with the content you were passionate about and that attracted the audience? Because you said you do kids, but you also on TikTok, it's like maybe like young women. So I was curious as to how do you go about that?
Totally. So definitely started with the content and then allowed the audience to find me. That would be how I'd recommend it as well. I think if you are creating in order to capture a very specific audience, then they run you, if you're always imagining like, what can I do in order to keep this particular audience engaged? That seems to be kind of like a low quality spiral. Whereas I think if you are leading with what you want to say, and then whoever's interested in that will find you, that to me seems like a much like more sustainable, higher quality spiral. But you're very right that means I have multiple audiences. Like at its core, at least in my head, it's at least in like being inside my body, it's the same message. Like it's always the same thing that I want to say, but I have said it for first year graduate students in my class. And I have said it for small children in my nonfiction books. And I have said it for 30-year-old women with no science background on my TikTok. And it's just, that's my message. And it's kind of manifested and attracted different audiences.
Great. Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's like it has to sustain you. It has to be a passion.
Yeah.
And then it also is about quality. Correct.
Yeah. And I think people can see that. Like, I think at least like the feedback that I've gotten is that one of the more engaging things about me, like as a creator, is the visible energy, like the visible passion that I have for kind of the message, right? That's not fake. And if I was like sitting calculating, being like, how do I get people to watch my TikToks? I would do different things. I might have a larger audience, but I certainly wouldn't have the kind of like core engaged audience that I have now.
Great. Thank you.
I would totally second that too. And like in the sense that for my case, like there is a lot of neuroscientists in the world now. There's even a lot of neuroscientists online and creating content, but there's only one Derrick Buchanan. There's only one Kate MacDonald. So like by just telling your version of your story, like that is your way to break through that noise. I think when Brendan's talking about the signal to noise ratio, like you are your story. That's the thing that you should carry through with you. You have an interesting story. You've done interesting things. Whether you've published research or whatever it was in your life, like that's the framing. And if you kind of start with that first and let that guide you, like what is it that you want to share, that you just have to tell people, and you come through as yourself, and like a little less on like, not needing to focus on trying to like hack algorithms and things, and just trying to tell your story is the best way to stay unique and novel.
Yeah, I would add to that and say authenticity is the greatest currency these days because there's so much AI stuff going on. And so you can use it for marketing, you can use it to help you, but people really gravitate towards a genuine story, a genuine person, somebody's genuine passion. And that really comes through, I think comes through for all our speakers today. And I think it's what people have an instinct for, and putting yourself in your story can be a really effective way of getting your message out there.
Any other questions if anyone wants to come off? We're at time. I can still hang for a few minutes, and if anybody does have to hop off, that's okay. But if we have a few more minutes, maybe we can still take some questions. You can unmute or put them in the chat or raise your hand.
I do have another question. Sorry, if somebody else wants to go, they should. Oh, hold on.
I see one from Carly. You have your hand up.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Carly.
Hi, Carly.
My perspective at this talk is from the perspective of a patient. I have a traumatic brain injury. And what I've found throughout my recovery is it seems like neurologists, neurosurgeons, they know a by the book way of like how I should be treated. But my experience was that it didn't really heal me. And I was super lucky to find my way to neuromodulation therapies, psychedelics, somatics, things that really healed my brain and my nervous system and my soul. Now I'm a really strong advocate. And I'm having a hard time interfacing with the physicians to say like, hey, I think that perhaps the approach that you're taking isn't really helpful. How can I convince you or show you evidence of these alternative therapies that are more so towards healing as opposed to symptom whacking? Do you guys have any tips in this room of how I, as a patient, can productively interface and change, or at least like allow my narrative to be known with on the other side of the field amongst like academics and surgeons?
Thanks for sharing that with us, Carly. That's a really interesting perspective and like challenge to have, I guess, to kind of come from the patient side and translate up. And you know, I my initial take on that is I would almost reverse some of my thinking from a lot of what I've said today in a way. Like if it's you as a patient trying to communicate to the practitioner, to a neurologist, to a psychiatrist, a lot of doctors, we're trying to help doctors think, how do we communicate to the community? But I think as a patient to the doctors, a lot of doctors think in, especially if you're kind of approaching it from a neurologist, a psychiatrist perspective, a lot of them think in papers. And so maybe from your side, like sharing the relevant literature with them, sharing the relevant like experiences, like in addition to your narrative, but kind of taking that and putting it back into the science side and being able to share those papers and say like, here is a collection of papers. And I think if you're specifically thinking about something like neuromodulation or like some psychedelic therapy, showing them one thing they love to see is things like randomized controlled trials or meta-analyses that maybe, and that's, I don't know if that's the best answer, but that's my thought of like, if I was trying to communicate with a doctor to go up the other way, but I guess also really trying to get them to understand like your story and where you're coming from. But I think that they have this sort of bias toward the literature and trying to trust this evidence-based medicine, and that maybe that's one way. If you've done all this research on your own to find these solutions that work for you, the advocacy is amazing, and then like backing that up with any kind of peer-reviewed research. So it's kind of flipping a lot of what we've said today on its head, because it's going from community back to doctor instead of doctor back to community, where usually we need to structure things differently.
Carly, I'm also would like to add, first of all, I thank you very much for sharing your story. And second, I really wish you a lot of patience, because you will need a lot of patience. Because like most of these doctors will probably have a very high ego, and it will be really hard to go for this. And trust me, I think I know what you're talking about. But the best way for you is, of course, yes, I agree with Derrick with the, like all the science, like evidence-based papers, etc. But you need to like really start like having control of the narrative, and from the beginning say, hey, my experience, I've talked to so many doctors. That's what I got, and that's what I want to have. I want you to sit here and listen to what I'm going to say, which might be very different to whatever you heard before. Sometimes you need to have set up this straight, like from the first meeting, because otherwise they would just treat you as a regular person who has no idea what they're coming with and have no idea what to do. And again, I wish you a lot of patience.
Yeah, I think patience is definitely the key. I'm also curious what you guys think about how I, as a patient, can start to get in the rooms of where neurology care standards are set. Like, how can I reverse my way into that room as opposed to leaving the room and going into the meeting?
You have an amazing story. You have an amazing story that you must share. Just literally all your experience. This is like, a lot of scientists don't have a story. They have just like the life living from the like bachelor, then they end up with PhD, ended up doing some research that they're not even inspired about. In your case, you have your own story, and this is exactly what people would like to know. They would like to get your experience. They would like to learn what you went through. They would like to learn about how different you are. And you have the most important part. You have something to say, and just you right now need to do the second easiest part, just to go and put yourself out there. Literally go for the TEDx talks, put your story in writing, and just start submitting, because you have an interesting story with probably some conclusions and learnings, and that's what everybody is looking for.
And I'll add one last thing to that too. Thanks, Mariam. And then we'll go to Melek. I see your hand up there. The last thing I'll say on that, Carly, which I meant to say this early, actually, it's like a really practical tip for actually finding the right people or engaging with them is on LinkedIn. So you could go to you can go to follow any of these neurologists, psychiatrists, et cetera, on LinkedIn. You can try to connect with them that way, or like sharing things through LinkedIn that they can see your story. That you can go into the search bar and also find like neurology-based communities, brain injury associations, all these like patient-centered communities, and join those. And through those sort of like advocacy style groups is a really great way to reach those communities. And I find LinkedIn is a great resource for that. By just using that search function, you can search in the title like neurologist or brain injury or, you know, different communities, American Psychiatric Association, or these larger associations. And by following those groups, you can tag them in things and follow them on their pages and when trying to connect with anybody. So like taking this, you know, that same approach, but then, you know, now back to thinking about science communication, that's something I've found really useful as well. As you can, if you're starting to build your portfolio and trying to do science communication, you can want to get on podcasts, or you want to get on TV segments, et cetera. Go into LinkedIn, go into your search bar, search reporter, TV reporter, search podcaster. People who there's hundreds of people who have podcasts, who are TV reporters, who are writers, who are authors of books. Search that in your search function in LinkedIn. It's going to show you hundreds and hundreds of people who have that title, and then just send them connection requests. And it's like, now you're connected to 100 reporters. You're connected to 100 people who have done TV segments, or people who are TV reporters, or people who write for the Time magazine or New York Times or Washington Post. Like, those are big things. So people put that in their profile. So the keywords end up finding that. And now when you post on LinkedIn and you tell something about a paper, all those people you connected with, now I publish a new paper and 100 reporters end up seeing that, or, you know, could, because they're connected with me, or people who, you know, do TV interviews, et cetera. So they'll see what you're posting because you've made that connection. But I want to be mindful of time here, and we'll take Melek's question. And if there's any last ones, put them out. Otherwise, this might have to be our last one.
Thanks, everyone.
And then I will announce the winners. I meant to do that, but let's take Melek's question first.
Hi, thank you for organizing this. It's been very inspiring, actually. My question is, a lot of the scientists might feel like they want to communicate what they are doing in the lab, but that they're in a place where they don't even understand where their research is going, or that it's way too specific and way too complicated to somehow communicate. What are your thoughts or tips on that?
Yeah, it's hard to get started. Do you want to jump in, Kate?
I do. No such thing as too complicated. Like, yeah, there is a way. It's interesting. Like, you're spending 40 hours a week thinking about your topic. It's deeply interesting, which means that there's a hook there for it. Even if you feel like it's low resolution, like you're saying something that's not exactly what you're thinking about, because it requires several steps to get to like the cutting edge of your experiments. What are you talking about? Like, what are you thinking about for 40 hours a week in one sentence? That's the starting point. And then you give a little bit more information. I would really push back against, like, if you're wanting to start talking about your work, the sense that like, oh, it's too complicated, nobody's gonna be interested. No, there's always a first sentence or a way in, I think.
Yeah, totally. I would absolutely second that. I mean, I get that you can feel that pressure. It can feel complicated, but actually, even doing the exercise of taking the time to translate it into some sort of broader communication is a great exercise for you to hone your ability to tell that story. It's going to help you when you are in those academic settings, like being at conferences or having a poster presentation, or whatever that thing is. So like just kind of starting and breaking that down. And that could be, you sit in front of your phone, you set it up, you put it in selfie mode, and you just talk about your research for a minute and you post that. Or you take one of your papers and you put it in an AI and you help, and you work with the AI to help like come up with a summary of your paper, and maybe you can make posts about that on a blog. Or you try to think about, you know, yourself as a whole, kind of how you've, you know, what your journey was like. There's so many ways to approach it. And I think just getting started is the best way to really get that going. And you'll really kind of find your voice as you start to do that. And I just put in the chat. So I meant to say this a bit earlier while we still had everybody on. We are going to send emails to everybody who won, and we're going to send follow-up emails to everybody who submitted a paper with a discount code. 2 really cool papers. I'm not sure if you guys are still on, but yeah, 2 papers of folks who won free videos. So we'll get in touch with you so we can start making the videos. And yeah, no problem. Thanks so much, Mariam. We're going to hop off. Mariam has to run in a second here. Amazing. Really appreciate you joining. And we'll close the call in a second. Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize how much time we went over here. Well, thank you all for staying this long. But yeah, 2 amazing papers. Just incredible research. Again, so interesting. And I can't wait to see the videos for these. One is called Shadowboxing Salamanders, Defensive Behaviors in 2 Amazonian Bolitoglossa species. So that it sounds amazing. I had a quick look at the paper the other day. It sounds so cool. And another one is Yoga Prevents Gray Matter Atrophy in Women at Risk for Alzheimer's Disease, a randomized controlled trial. So cool. You will both be contacted by our team. Please look out for an email from us. This will likely come from Nikki at Royal World Archive. Nikki's an amazing help. She's our client service specialist, and he'll coordinate with you, and then we'll send everybody discount codes. And we are going to post the recording of this somewhere, so do feel free to follow up and watch. It's going to end up on the YouTube channel, and do feel free to tune back in, reach out, stay engaged with the community, find us on any of our socials, whether that's YouTube, Instagram. We post all the videos we make for these researchers get posted onto our channels. And we also have the WhatsApp community, which again, this is the inaugural launch. So you all kind of have first access to joining that with us. Thank you all again very much. Sorry we ran past time, but I'm glad we were all able to stay, and really appreciate all the speakers' time. You guys are amazing. I'm so lucky to have you all as friends and colleagues, and look forward to seeing you all. Great to meet you. Have a nice afternoon.
Thanks, you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.